Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for us to have a little bit of a discussion regarding Galbrena, because there's been a lot of talk, there's been a lot of rumors going around about some of the restrictiveness that's going to be built into our kit. And what I wanted to do was actually break down where that restrictiveness actually is and whether or not there are going to be some, pretty decent ways to work around it, given all the tools that we already have in the game. Because it's no lie at all to say that when it comes to Wuthering Waves, there's been a bit of a negative reputation regarding some of the character releases this year. And the biggest example that I can think of when it comes to those character restrictions is, of course, going to be our good friend over here, Zoni, who's going to be rerunning, and her partner in crime, Phoebe. Because it's pretty clear to, I think, most people that have played the game that, well, if you don't have Phoebe to help unlock this character's potential, this character will have a lot of problems in typical gameplay that can be alleviated with, like, quick swap and stuff like that, but it isn't really, it isn't really as fun to play her if you don't have her. So without further ado, let's go ahead, let's get on into our Galbrena breakdown and just talk about the main parts of her kit that I think are going to cause players some issues. We got our profile reveal over here from the official Wuthering Waves page where we get a full overview of her kit, and the dynamic that I'm going to be focusing on first is actually going to be seen all the way down here at the bottom next to her Forte circuit, and that is of course going to be Afterflame. I think a lot of people might not be entirely sure about how this mechanic works in particular, and I'll just break down what it is at a baseline. Galbrena basically has 5 echo skills that can be cast across her team to max out this effect. She can hold up to 40 points, and then each echo skill cast by her team grants her 8 points, right? And then it resets the next time she enters her special demon hypostasis state, where she ends up doing a bunch of damage. This Afterflame mechanic, the more points you have of it, basically means you have higher damage when Galbrena actually goes throughout her rotation. And the exact damage that it's going to be increased by is pretty linear. Each point of Afterflame increases her damage by 1.5%. So those 40 points from 5 echo skills, it gets you to about 60%. Let's look at this team over here, the Mono Fusion team, which I think Galbrena is going to be pretty decent on when she launches. This team only has 3 echo skills, right? You've got the one from Lupa over here, you're going to have the one from Brant over here, and then you're going to have the one from, let's just pretend Chang-Li is Galbrena over here, this one. And you can see that this one's a pretty neat little summon. It shouldn't really interrupt her rotation at all. It should be very seamless and easy to use. That's all the echo skills that are going to be on the team. Because when it comes to Galbrena, she doesn't actually have any echo skills at all in her kit, aside from the one that she manually casts from her abilities. So you'll see over here, right, that she has a lot of lines in her kit where parts of her basic attack, as well as her heavy attack, have stages, right? Stages 4 and 5, stage 3 over here, that are considered echo skill damage. That doesn't mean that you're casting an echo skill. So, at the end of the day, when it comes to this Afterflame mechanic, the max that you're going to be able to get in teams that don't have additional echo skill casters is 24 out of your 40 points. That's not that bad, though, when you think about it, right? Because you'll still multiply that 24 by 1.5, and naturally, right, instead of getting the whole 60% damage bonus, she's already going to have a 36% damage bonus at a baseline. And I'm just going to be entirely honest over here. If this is just like a percentage increase on the damage that's being done, ladies and gentlemen, then that gap that you're going to be missing, that's less damage bonus that you're missing than you would get from a 3-cost echo. And I'm just going to be real over here. 24% damage bonus isn't necessarily like the craziest thing that has ever happened to the game. What I think is a bigger concern when it comes to Galbrena, and what I think is a bigger concern when it comes to her kit and her teammates, is actually this part of her kit. I don't think that there's too much of an issue about this Afterflame thing. It just means that certain teammates are going to buffer more than others. It's the fact that when it comes to this skill line, echo skill damage, there's pretty much almost no sources of it in the game. There's almost no sources of it in the game, right? Echo skill damage is basically like a tagline that's seen over here. your attribute damage bonuses, like from the Chorosaurus over here, will fuel into it. So that 30% from here or the 30% from here will fuel into it. But aside from that, there's almost no other sources. The only other one we're going to have, ladies and gentlemen, is of course going to be Law of Harmony. Yep, it's going to be Law of Harmony. And how that set basically gives a stacking up to 60% echo skill damage to the entire team. And I think that this is a little bit concerning for a couple of reasons. It's pretty clear, if you've been playing this game and you know how, like, attack chains work, the highest damaging parts of your rotation, especially things like your basic attack chain, the highest damaging parts are typically at the end of the attack chain, right? It's understood that Galbrena, the first early stages of her attacks are considered heavy attack damage, but these last parts are always considered echo skill. And even her liberation, right, which does look like a highly damaging move, is also considered echo skill damage. But the thing is that when this stat is so hard to find, it honestly feels like she doesn't actually have a lot of great echo rolls, once you think about it, right? You got this bonus, and then the Law of Harmony bonus. And you'll notice, right, when you look at other echoes, other pieces, you're seeing things like basic attack damage bonus, right? You're seeing things like resonance skill damage bonus. You're seeing things like heavy attack damage bonus. And it's a little bit odd for a character who has these types of damage, right, that are split between echo and something else. Frolova's another good example of this. It feels odd that there's almost like no echo skill damage bonus that shows up inside of these substats, right? And I would just dare say that it feels like Kuro Games kind of like tacked on this whole echo skill damage bonus type mechanic. I don't even think it shows up in the stat screen either. Yeah, it doesn't even show up in the stat screen either. And I feel like as this damage type gets, like, fleshed out more and more, and, you know, it's like we're clearly seeing that this is a mechanic that's being built out on Frolova, it's being built out on Galbrena, it's also being built out, you know, as Cantarella when she's, like, an enabler. There just needs to be, like, more clarity overall as to, like, what's going on. Because if the chances are, you know, we all know that Galbrena only does heavy attack and only does echo skill damage, I feel like there just needs to be more development of this echo skill part, showing it in the stat page, you know, having more sources of it available readily from equipment. Because one thing is super clear. We talked a lot about how there's not a lot of sources of echo skill damage. There's another bonus that there's even less sources of. And that's, of course, going to be echo skill damage amplification. Because, guys, you see this stat over here? Upon dealing heavy attack damage, gain 24% echo skill damage amplification for 6 seconds. Guys, this stat is only available on weapons. There is no other way to get an echo skill damage amplification bonus other than to pull limited 5-star weapons. And there's one example of it already in the game, right? It is, of course, Frolova's signature. And having this echo skill damage amplification built in is one of the bigger ways to, one of the only ways, actually, to boost the Hikari damage that this character is dealing when she goes into her liberation. And I just kind of view this as a little bit off, right? Because we just talked about all those other damage types, right? We talked about all those other situations. And the thing is, guys, the only ways that right now on the roster that you can currently buff echo skill damage and amplify it is to just buff the general attribute of the character that's dealing echo skill damage. That's it. We have no outro skill in the game that just reads, you know, buff echo skill damage by X amount of percent, all of that. And most importantly, we don't have a 4-star character or a standard character that's going to buff echo skill damage too. Even if Chu Yan is a character that does it, he would be a 5-star limited unit. So there's no 4-star that buffs it either. And so I think that it's not nearly as bad. I think that at a baseline, it's not as bad as like Spectral Frazzle. It's not as bad as Era Erosion because echo skill damage always is just going to fall under the actual attribute, and there are plenty of general havoc buffers in the game, like Rosia and Cantarella, that will buff Echo skill damage. There are clearly, I've got the 3 of them on my screen, there are clearly 3 fusion resonators in the game with outro skills that will buff Echo skill damage. But it does feel like this mechanic is not as fleshed out as I feel like it should be. And the biggest example of it, once again, I'll go back to this menu, is the fact that Echo skill damage doesn't even show up here. It doesn't even show up here when it pretty much makes sense that it would appear, right, somewhere along the 4 main damage types, especially considering that there are so many characters that deal so much of it. And, well, think about it this way. We got a special resonant skill damage type, we got a special basic attack damage type. Any general fusion damage amplification would also apply to all of these damage types. So, I think that's one thing that the devs should definitely keep in mind, just for, like, more clarity in the character building, so on and so forth, into the future. That's kind of like my main sort of, like, spiel when it comes to Galbrena. That's sort of like my main spiel when it comes to her issues. It's the fact that there's not a lot of clarity. It's not necessarily the fact that she's losing out on a lot of buffs. Because, like I said before, ladies and gentlemen, right? It's just 24% damage bonus, right? It's just 24% damage bonus, so it's not a huge amount. But unfortunately, because of how Echo substats roll, I can't go ahead, right? I can't roll a fusion damage bonus. I can't roll an Echo skill damage bonus. And so if you aren't, right? If you were like a unit, like a Gion, or you were a unit like, I don't know, whatever, and you didn't have the character signature, then you could make it up by... Well, let's just say I didn't have Chang Li's signature, so I don't have the resonant skill damage bonus. I could make it up by, you know, really rolling my echoes hard to try to get resonant skill damage on as many pieces as possible to make up for the fact that I'm missing Chang Li's weapon. There's not going to be any way in the game to make up for the fact that you're missing out on this damage bonus, right, to echo skills. There's not really going to be any way in the game to make up for the fact that you don't have echo skill damage amplification. And the unfortunate part is that this character is going to feel like you're missing something if you're not, well, let's just be honest here, paying the cash or the pulls to get her best team and to get her best teammates and to get her best weapon. While for other characters, it feels like there's stuff that you can do. There's things that you can work for to make it less of an issue. Now, let me just make some concessions over here. I think that Kuro has factored some of these issues into the design. I think there's a reason why the Korosaurus' damage bonus is so much higher compared to every other passive skill in the game, right? It's a 12% fusion and then a 20% echo skill damage, when typically it would be a 12%, right, for any of the other damage types. And you could say, yeah, this is a lot easier to get than rolling it on a substat alongside double crit, so it's not really that big of a deal, Saint. I would just say it's a clarity issue, and it feels like echo skills are being tacked on. And the biggest thing for me is that I feel like this is going to become a much bigger issue later down the line unless there are some overall changes to the system. Because right now, you can kind of see where the growing pains are already beginning, especially when it comes to things like the weapon and the buff design. And I'm just going to be entirely honest over here. I think that Kuro can definitely do a lot better when it comes to this implementation. Now, let's move on to the next topic when it comes to Galbrena's team building, and that is, of course, going to be, well, the actual teams that she's going to be using. Once again, we're going to be pretending that Chang Li is Galbrena for these examples. I think the Mono Fusion team is going to function just fine, because Lupa's going to have all of these insane buffs, you know, built in for the Flaming Claw print set. That's going to give you a nice general damage bonus that can be used for those echo skills. You're also going to have Wildfire Mark giving a general damage bonus as well for those echo skills. And then, of course, right, you got even more fusion damage bonus built into here. Honestly, Lupa just feels like one of the best buffers for a Galbrena. Not because it's like, oh, you know, we need all this pack hunt stuff. She doesn't even have outro skills in the team that benefit her, right? Because all she's getting is the 20% from either a Brant or a Lupa, because there's no heavy attack in here, right? But the thing is, Lupa just being a general source of all of this either like fusion resistance reduction or, like I said before, the 39% damage bonus built into her kit, That's all echo skill damage bonus that Galbrena can't really get anywhere else. And that, I think alone, is pretty damn significant. Now we got some other teams, right, to think about. And I feel like this is where you're really going to start seeing stuff come to a bit of a head. These characters over here, again, pretending Chang Li is Galbrena, these guys don't have as much synergy as you might think. The main synergy that's going to exist over here, and let's just put Cantarella on the team as well, is the fact that this lineup that you were seeing over here, Furlova, Cantarella, Galbrena, this is going to be basically the only team in the game that's really able to, well, build up Galbrena's Afterflame to max stacks. There's not really any other ones. Furlova's gonna go ahead. She's gonna have, I believe her forte is considered casting an echo skill, right? When she uses Scarlet Coda, that big heavy attack. So Furlova's gonna have 2 of them built into her kit, and then Cantarella, right, is gonna go ahead and naturally have 1, 2, 3, and then she has her baseline 1 for 4. This is going to be the only team that, well, can fully utilize Galbrena's Afterflame mechanic on release. And I just have one thing to say to you. It's just going to be worse than this team. Which is kind of like the big issue. It's going to be worse than this team. And that's kind of like one of like the big issues that I think people are going to have with this Afterflame, this stacking mechanic. It's the fact that the only team in the game that's able to fully leverage it and fully utilize it on release is going to be made worse by putting her in it. And naturally, right, when you look at the Law of Harmony set and everything that it's going to provide for different teams, it's pretty clear that this set is, you know, going to be used by a soon upcoming character, and then they're going to be the one that's probably going to be on Galbrena's team. And I think that it's definitely not as on the nose as some of the pairings that we've seen in the past, but I think it is going to leave a bitter taste in people's mouths for a set like this, right? To require a character to have multiple echo skills, and then it's also providing a stat that's incredibly rare and pretty much unable to be acquired anywhere else on the roster. When you look at other units that are getting supported, they're getting supported on sets like Moonlit Clouds, or they're getting buffed by sets like Empyrean Anthem. These don't require units to have like echo skills and things like that built into their kit. You even look at Flaming Clawprint, right? You don't actually even need an echo skill built into your kit. You don't even need to be a fusion character to activate Flaming Clawprint. And I think that this set definitely could have had maybe some restrictions loosened so that more characters could use it, just for like, you know, maybe you could toss it on like a Mortifi, maybe you could toss it on a Uno, something like that. Because right now, this set seems really similar to Gusts of Welkin for me, which would have been a lot nicer if Gusts of Welkin was a lot more accessible. But right now, there's one unit in the game that can use this. Yeah, it's Chakona, and pretty much nobody else is able to reasonably activate its effects. Arrow Rover technically can if you convert Spectral Frazzle, but if you're running a Phoebe's Arrow Rover team, I would highly suggest you either read the kits of the characters that you're actually using. It just feels really restrictive, right? And I feel like this set didn't necessarily need to be designed this way because it's the only set in the game that's going to be able to provide this buff. It's the only one in the game that can provide this buff. However, there is one light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to acquiring this stat and when it comes to acquiring it more, you know, on a budget scale. The Impermanence Heron, the 4-cost Impermanence Heron, is actually one of the only sources of, like, affordable, free-to-play echo skill damage in the game. Because this just boosts all of your attribute damage types by 12%. It'll give you 12% fusion, 12% arrow, 12% spectral, 12% of everything. And that also means 12% echo skill damage. So it's there. It's in the game. The possibilities are possible. But I'm just gonna be honest. You can see how some people are gonna start having some issues with how this is all built up. So I'm personally in the boat that I think Kuro Games really just needs to start fleshing out this mechanic a lot more. I want to start seeing stuff like this in the stat pages. I want to see some more free-to-play accessible, just some more easy ways to acquire this skill. I don't want it to be, I can only get it from Sonata set effects. I would love some way to maybe like finagle it into like a substat role so that it's more available, because this is slowly but surely, right? You can see the starting steps of it. When the ways to buff this stat are primarily being seen either on the limited character banner by only being able to buff it by having characters with multiple echo skill casts, and the only ways to amplify it are found on the gacha weapon banner, it is starting to feel like, well, if you want to use echo skill damage characters, get ready to start paying up. And that to me is like, I don't think teams need to feel that premium. Because like I said before, if I'm running a character like my Gion, right? And it just so turns out I didn't have Verdant Summit. All I had available was like Lustrous Razor. I could make it up with heavy attack damage rolls. There's no way to make up for the fact that you're missing echo skill damage amplification. Where else are you going to get that stat? I can roll heavy attack on my echoes. I can't roll echo skill damage or echo skill damage amplification. There's not even a character that gives echo skill damage amplification. And I think that to me is kind of like, let's just be honest here. Put it on a 4-star weapon. Put it on Battle Pass weapon. Put it on craftable weapons, right? Add 4-star weapons, made for like sub DPSs where they sacrifice their damage potential, but then are able to provide these buffs. Something along those lines, so that, we don't end up feeling like the only way to access this type of gameplay is to literally pay money on the game, because I'm just going to be honest over here. That is currently the only way to activate these stats. And that to me is a little, well, I think it's enough to consider it a team building, but also kind of like a wider roster issue. Like I said before, as a bit of a summary, I don't think that there's anything actually wrong with Galbrena. I don't think that she has some incredible, awful, disturbing weaknesses without having 5 echo skills on her team. But it's the fact that, well, you're just inherently going to be missing out on bonuses that you have no way of actually catching up on unless you pull on the gacha. And once again, the problem is not nearly as severe as this situation that we had earlier on this year, but it is a problem that is literally going to affect multiple characters, because it is something that has already affected Filova. And we all know for certain one of the big reasons for why that prior drama regarding her weapon occurred, it wasn't because she's overwhelmingly powerful with her weapon, it's because of the fact that her weapon has stats that you can literally not get anywhere else in the game. And that, unfortunately, is what I think a lot more people are upset about. To note, when it comes to the Law of Harmony set, you need a from the gacha to even activate this set. Cantarella is currently the only character in the game, because of her 4 echo skill casts, that can maximize this set bonus. Everybody else either gets 1 stack or 2. That's it. And so this, again, you gotta get into the gacha. You gotta engage with the gacha to do pretty much anything when it comes to improving this archetype. That'll be that for that one, ladies and gentlemen. That's our breakdown. Once again, I'm not intending on this being like a Doom Posty sort of situation. I think we've already clarified multiple times it's not actually a big deal for Galbrena, but you can see where the growing pains are going to be for this mechanic and for this build out in the future. Because let's be real here, if you're gonna have a set like Law of Harmony in the game, I'm pretty sure there's going to be more than 1 or 2 echo skill damage teams. And I'd rather Kuro start putting in the work to fix this up now, rather than have it blow up in their face later when people are like, oh, this entire archetype is pay to win. Because, well, all you gotta look at is Honkai Star Rail, is entire 3.0 roster, all the remembrance units, to get a taste of what that is. Let me know what you all thought about this breakdown. Peace.